I only met my dad 3 times my whole life. And each time was for about 5 or 10 minutes at most. Within this book, there's chapter 9 or chapter 11, most powerful tool he knows of that he created, and it's a powerful transformation tool. You just have to do the work, and of course, I never did the work. So the first thought was, oh my god, my dad actually loves me. The second thought was, I got this from a book. This is the first time that a personal development book had actually made this big of an impact, a noticeable physical change in my body. I mean, I had tears in my eyes. Hey guys, this is Doug Spence with Spence Life Coaching. Today, I want to tell you guys a bit about myself, and I want to tell you kind of my story and just tell you a bit about my history and how I became a coach. And really, the person I have to thank for this is my dad. So, my dad was an alcoholic, and he lived in the shittiest hotel in town for about 20 years. I only met my dad 3 times my whole life, and each time was for about 5 or 10 minutes at most. So when I was 5 or 6 years old, I would go to bed crying, "Where's my dad? I want my dad. I want my dad. I want my dad." So my mom finally took me to go meet my dad at my grandma's house. And as soon as I walked into the house, I was just like, "Oh my god, what is that smell?" And I hear this voice to my left. "Hey son, give me a hug." I look over and I see this scraggly, dirty guy, and I realize the smell is coming from him. So I give him a hug. We stand there for about 5 minutes, talk about nothing, and then I go. So that was the first time I met my dad. And in that moment, I judged him and I said, I don't want anything to do with this guy. And I said, I'm good. I don't need a dad. I'm good. 5 years old, I decided I don't need a dad. I'm good. So I go on. I continue to go on and, just have my normal life. And there's still that void. I still believe like I'm missing something, somebody to play catch with, someone to wrestle. I still felt like I was missing something, missing that dad. But, I just kept going on. Then when I was 16, on my 16th birthday, I'm at home with my mom and my brother and my best friend. He shows up at the house and he's drunk and he looks weird, and he looks funny because he's basically looks like a homeless guy. And he gave me some money and he gave my brother some money, and then he hugged my best friend thinking it was me. And then this was after he gave me money, so he gave me the money but hugged my best friend, so it's like he wasn't really fully there. So that incident lasted about 20 minutes, and that was for me super embarrassing. And I was actually just was like, couldn't believe this guy, right? It was one of my worst memories. Okay. So that was the second time I met my dad. The third time I was like 18, 20 years old, something like that. And I went downtown and I was going to meet my friends at the bar, and look who's there. I'm walking. I have to walk down the street. Look who's there. He's standing there, all tipsy, and he's sitting there with his old lady. And I'm like, I can't cross the street. There's like trains over here. And I was like, I have to walk right past this guy. So I'm just like, I'm just going to walk straight and just, ignore him. Like I don't see him. And so I just keep walking. And right as I'm like in front of him, he says, "Hey boy, got a smoke?" And I just didn't know what to say. I just turned, I just looked him in the eyes, and I just shook my head, and I just kept going. And I thought it was ironic that he called me boy, and he just didn't even know he was talking to his own son. So those were painful memories for me. And I kind of just took those painful memories and I just kind of pushed them down and put them away and, ignored them and just kind of decided to move on. And then, I figured I don't have any baggage. I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't have this fatherless syndrome or whatever that, people talk about. It didn't affect me, right? I just kind of put that away. But I had a few people like my stepdad and my mom. They're like, "Oh yeah, it affected you. Like you can't see it, but we can all see it." And so that was really I took their word for I value their word. And I think some of the ways that it showed up was becoming hyperly attached in my first few relationships. And but I didn't really deal with it. um, and I learned how to deal with anger because I studying Buddhism at around the age of 18. And that was a huge learning mindfulness at the age of 18, where discovering that my thoughts how my thoughts affected my feelings, and just becoming fully aware of my own thoughts and feelings. And that was huge. That helped a lot. And I just continued going through. But really, when I had the major, let's say, breakthrough or change, was when I was 33. And that's when I became a father. And I knew I had baggage around my own father. So I knew I needed to deal with it. And of course, I was reading books on self help, personal development, just as usual. I read basically all the main books. You name it, I've probably read it. Tony Robbins, Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics, Man's Search for Meaning, things on affirmations, Think and Grow Rich, you know, NLP books, everything. And but I came across this book. The first one was the values factor. But then the other book that I came across after that was the breakthrough experience. And I'm reading this book, and within this book, there's chapter 9 or chapter 11. He's talking about the DeMartini method, the most powerful tool he knows of that he created, and it's a powerful transformation tool. You just have to do the work. And of course, I never did the work. I ignored it. I ignored that. I knew I needed to do it on my dad, but I ignored doing the process for at least a year. And just, not wanting to face it, not wanting to face that baggage and and just go through it. So, but my son was having his first birthday. He was almost a year old. I knew I needed to get this done. So I finally had the opportunity. He was napping in the back seat of the car, and I just took him around for a car nap. So I'm sitting in the parking lot, he's sleeping, and I got this book, and I'm like, okay, I read the book. It's time to do the exercise. So I go through the exercise. It's in a table format. It looks like an Excel spreadsheet, basically. You go through the columns by columns, and slowly you start to have these epiphanies, or you slowly you're being asked these questions. So one of the questions was, what trait, action, or inaction did this person do that that you despised or disliked? So I was using traits at the time, and I said he was inconsiderate, selfish, and lazy. So, and I was getting most of this from, so he never gave us any money throughout our whole life. You know, when I was growing up, he never raised his kids, he never had a job. Um, so I judged him as inconsiderate, lazy, and selfish because he drank. So I just saw him as someone who just drank and just enjoyed his life drinking. So then you go through each column and you ask a question. And one of the questions was, who has perceived this individual doing the opposite? And I was like, what? How am I supposed to know that? Like, who has perceived him doing the opposite? And but like, I had faith in this process. I was like, okay, I have to keep looking, keep digging. So one of the things that they say in the book is you got to keep digging if you want to get to the gold. So I didn't stop. I kept asking the question, who has seen him do the opposite? And I was like, was it my mom when I was a baby, my sister? Like, I'm just like, who's seen him do the opposite? Or what the, it's just, and this is only like, I'm asking this question for about 10 minutes. Like, so I didn't give up. Like, I just kept going, kept going. And then all of a sudden, it hit me. And I realized that I had seen him do the opposite, because on that day that he came to my birthday, he remembered my birthday. He remembered the date that I was born. And then he somehow, after 10 years of not seeing me, he somehow found our home address. Then he had a withered leg because he had polio when he was a child. Then he got on the bus and crossed town, and then he had to walk to our house. And he had to face his ex, my mom, and his kids. So he was probably literally terrified to come and see us and embarrassed. So he drank, and he lived on the government. He had hardly any money, but then he comes and he gives me $100 and gives my brother $40 or whatever it was. So he gave us whatever little money he had. So out of asking that question, I realized, oh my God, my dad actually loves me. And this was a huge epiphany. This was a huge breakthrough. And it was a shift in perspective. It was the same memory, but the way that I saw the memory had completely changed. There was new information there about him that I hadn't seen before. And so the first thought was, oh my God, my dad actually loves me. The second thought was, I got this from a book. This is the first time that a personal development book had actually made this big of an impact, a noticeable physical change in my body. I mean, I had tears in my eyes when this happened. When I had this epiphany, I had tears in my eyes. So this was huge. So I really wanted to know, how does this process work? Like, how did this happen? How did we get this process that was described in one chapter of the book? And then it created this life-changing epiphany. And he explains that these are all based on universal principles. So I was like, how do these work? I needed to know how these work. So I started reading all of his books. The Values Factor. It's an awesome book for understanding people's values. The Gratitude Effect. It's an amazing book for starting to have those epiphanies, starting to see things in a new light. The Heart of Love. He talks about relationships, and he talks about he goes through the DeMartini method again in a more expanded version, and he also includes a grief method, a DeMartini method that applies to grief, which is completely different than the regular DeMartini method. So I continued digging and learning about the DeMartini method. Then after reading all of his books, I started going to YouTube and listening to all of his interviews, which there are a lot. He probably has thousands of interviews. I listen, each one's about an hour. I've listened to about 200 hours of his YouTube interviews where he tells incredible stories and he describes how things how he discovered his method. Each time I listened to a new interview, I'd gain a new piece of information, a new piece of the puzzle. Then I after a few years, I actually decided I needed to get certified. So I took his DeMartini method facilitator training. And I'd also taken some coaching and some training from another one of his master facilitators. Putting this all together, anyways, I've gained a deep understanding of the DeMartini method, and I have a deeper understanding of how that epiphany was created. And taking all of that information and combining it with other teachers, other spiritual teachers, people like David Hawkins, who wrote Force versus Power and Letting Go, and he created the map of consciousness. So now I've connected the DeMartini method and figured out how that relates to the map of consciousness. Then I've also learned from other teachers such as Byron Katie. Byron Katie's book, Loving What Is. She also has a super amazing, powerful process that can reverse limiting beliefs, that can break and reverse limiting beliefs. And that also relates to the map of consciousness again. And it relates to the DeMartini method again. And what I realize is all of these methods are questions. And all of these questions are helping you to break your own bias, to help you to see more than what you can see initially. So, what you can see now, so for example, we can only see a certain spectrum of light. We can only hear a certain spectrum of sound. And we're biased within those millions of bits of information. We're only taking in a small slice of information out of millions of bits of information. So what these questions do is they actually help us to open our awareness to take in new information. And that can be from the present moment, from the challenges that you're going through now, or it could be in the past where we have a memory from the past that we only are recalling half of it, like with my dad. And it helps us to recall the other subconscious parts of those memories. And going back to DeMartini method for grief, after being exposed and seeing other facilitators, what they can do, there are grief techniques. The grief process can take someone who's in grief and take them through the process, and within an hour or two, their grief is completely cleared. And most people cannot wrap their heads around that. They can't understand that grief is just like any other perception, any other, um, yeah, basically any other perception that can be changed. So since we are experiencing, we're not really experiencing reality, we're experiencing our perception of reality. We live in our consciousness. So we can change, or we can expand on what we're seeing. And what I'm finding is the more we ask these questions and the more aware we become, that we're just finding out the truth. The more we ask these questions, the more aware we become, we're finding out a truth that spiritual teachers and spiritual leaders or whoever have been saying for thousands of years, is that we live in a loving universe. We live in a loving realm, a loving reality, and that we're really here to just kind of learn and grow. And all of these challenges that are happening to us are actually for our own benefit, for our own growth. And they help us to mature and to evolve and to connect with others and to connect with ourselves and to connect with a higher power. So, and there, it just continues on. So I'm just continuing to learn and grow as I coach, and as I continue to expand my knowledge of information. And there are so many tools out there that can help, and I just love learning all of them. But I wanted to share a little bit about how I got into coaching, and I'll give you guys a little bit more about my background and tell you that story about my dad and about the DeMartini method and how powerful that is. So I hope this message reaches you, and I look forward to hearing from you. You can visit my website. It's spencelifecoaching.com. And yeah, leave a comment below, and let me know how this message impacted you. Talk to you later.